Bob Grant, every introduction today, every speaker, every person who was giving a segue between major speakers was recognizing the Honorable Louis Farrakhan as being the reason that everybody is here today. Assalamu alaikum is the word here, not God bless you. And I might add that there is a complete lack of American flags. What really struck me is that although we're in the shadow of the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial, no one made reference to America's greatness, the fact of the struggle that so many men of all different colors had in fighting for freedom so that 500,000 could gather here and speak freely. I see Jamaican flags, I see Trinidadian flags, I see the flag of black, the red, green, and black flag, and I see very little acknowledgement of America or being America, and this troubles me strongly because this is a gathering of African Americans from all over the country. Many of them are here, I'm sure, on good grounds, but I can't imagine in my questioning of them how they can separate the message of getting your act together, putting drugs aside, putting booze aside, caring for your families, treating your women equally, how all of a sudden they could just believe in that message and then not tie into the baggage of Louis Farrakhan, who they all acknowledge is the reason they're here to begin with.
Well, of course, all of that stuff about being responsible fathers and cleaning up the neighborhood, cleaning themselves up, that's all window dressing. You know that. The reason for this is simple. It's to demonstrate the power of Louis Farrakhan. It is so reminiscent, Curtis. And I know it's overdone to draw parallels between things that happened today and things that happened in pre-Nazi Germany and then Nazi Germany in the 1930s, but it is so reminiscent. Hitler would stage these rallies. He had a very small percentage of the public saying they backed him, but in no time flat, he intimidated, he terrorized, and eventually he took over that country. Now, I'm not saying Louis Farrakhan is going to take over the United States of America tomorrow, next week, or next year, but I think that is his dream.
There's no question that he's conducted this Million-Man March right at the location of Martin Luther King's gathering in preparing for the Civil Rights Movement's final move, equality for all. And really what Farrakhan has signaled to all the black males gathered here today is integration is not the workable idea, it's separation. Separation in which blacks have demanded reparations, in which Jesse Jackson is now claiming that 1 out of every 3 young black males is incarcerated because of Sperry Rand, because of American Express investing in jails, in privatizing jails. Such nonsense. Actually advocating that crack users and crack dealers be turned loose because they're guilty of such minor violations when in fact they're being arrested because they are violators of their fellow black men and black women and terrorize them in their own communities. I tell you, Bob, it is a throwback, as you said, to days gone by in which the likes of a zealot like Adolf Hitler himself could fire up the masses and preach separatism and then attack the Jews. And each and every person who has accosted me here, who has confronted me, and sometimes there have been as many as 100 or 200, have said, what problem do you have with Farrakhan calling Jews bloodsuckers? Aren't they? Don't they suck the life out of the community? Why don't you leave black people to themselves and tell the Koreans and tell all the other Asians and the Jews to leave us alone and leave our neighborhoods? Now you tell me, if this wasn't a rally to acknowledge what Farrakhan has been saying, why is it they're dispensing his materials, the protocols of the Elder of Silence, they're talking anti-Semitic rhetoric on the sidelines? No, Bob Grant, you are correct. There is a hidden agenda to this rally, and it goes well beyond the quality of life of the black family in 1995.
Curtis, I understand that in addition to what you're doing right now, you are also recording various statements being made to you, statements that you might have to heavily censor because of the language being used, but that you will share those tape recordings with your audience at 2 this morning when you take to the airwaves for your 4-hour program. Is that true?
That is correct. From 2 in the morning till 6. I've got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of graphic, vile language that is directed at me, towards you, and towards others at WABC. But once I can clean it up and get to the gist of the arguments, you'll hear anti-Semitism like you haven't heard since the days of Father Coughlin, Adolf Hitler, and the great Semites, anti-Semites of history. It is at that par, and it is part and parcel of that rally. It cannot be separated from the message here today, Bob Grant. And if I were a Jew, this being the holiday sukkah, building a little bit of a hut, I'd make sure it was a bomb shelter, a bunker, because this is definitely a very bad message that's being sent out here today, at least on the sidelines, from the supporters of Louis Farrakhan, who are controlling this rally, directing this rally, and who are giving all praise and tribute, assalamu alaikum, to Louis Farrakhan, the new leader, as they call him, of Black America.
Curtis, check back in anytime you wish, and I admonish you to watch your back.
Well, I won't be mentioning your name in this crowd, Bob.
Okay, Curtis SLIWA. All right.
Descriptive labels have been given people in public life like Slick Willie, and you had that very good one, the Butcher of Brentwood, so I suggest that anti-white, anti-Catholic, and anti-Semitic Louis Farrakhan henceforth be referred to as Adolf Farrakhan. I think that would give the whole message.
Appreciate the thought, Harry. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, here's Anthony on the telephone. Hello, Anthony. What's on your mind, sir?
Yes, Bob. I've been watching the coverage. So far, the rally seems peaceful, but with the inevitable hate-mongering and finger-pointing, do you feel this whole crowd could become violent?
No, I don't think so. I don't think the crowd itself will. No, not collectively. Maybe it might inspire more hatred, more animosity, more antipathy, and that might bring about violence in their lives wherever they return. But I don't think in D.C. today there will be violence. No, sir.
One other quick question, Bob. Will you be attending the White House march? I mean, the Washington march next week by Mark Furman for white people who aren't recycling properly? It's a good cause.
You're a sick jerk. Get off my phone. There's nothing funny about that. I tell you, that's why this republic will not endure. There are too many sick people like that in it. And I see the Trinidadian flag, the Jamaican flag, a few other flags, but you won't find an American flag there to save your life, because they are not Americans. By their own actions, they are not Americans. Now, okay, want to write letters? You want to condemn me? Say, you said they weren't Americans. No, they say they're not Americans. Chris, hello. Are you there, Chris? Chris decided not to talk. Okay, let's try Monica. Hello, Monica.
Oh, hi, Bob. Pleasure talking to you. I met you once in Mayfair Farm. I'm a waitress. It's over a year ago. Anyway, what I want to talk to you, I met your friend, Sharpie James. I worked a breakfast yesterday in Robert Reed, Newark, and he really... I was so upset I cannot even talk no more. He called you the most dangerous man in America.
Sharp James called me that?
Yes.
Maybe
and
because...
a racist.
Huh?
And also Rush Limbaugh he called that, and also Jay Diamond.
Oh, you mean I have to share the stage with those two guys?
Yes,
oh.
yes.
Now, what made... hold on a minute now. Take it easy, Monica.
Mm-hmm.
What made him denounce us like that? What brought that about?
Out of the blue. It was a political Democratic party for Congresswoman Littman, and he was on the dais. In fact, I was serving the
Congresswoman who?
Is it Littman? Littman, the black lady, she's, I think, Littman.
She's not a congresswoman. I think she's an assemblywoman.
Oh, assemblywoman, right.
Yeah.
You're right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so he shared the dais with her. And in fact, I had to serve that table. I felt like we had scrambled eggs and sausage. I felt like by accident dropped it on him. But I was very upset. And he told there was about 500 people on that breakfast. And he told them not to listen to that station. It's the most racist station.
Now, I tell you what he's worried about. He's worried because guys like me have got his number and want to know where he got all that cash to pay cash for those condominiums, for that boat. We want to know when the government is going to reveal whatever they found in an investigation.
That's what I...
When Tommy D'Alessio was indicted and convicted and sent up, there were many of us who wondered, while they got the county executive, what about the mayor? That's what he's worried about.
100%, you're right. Anyway, I'm so happy talking to you, but I couldn't wait. I never talked
Okay,
on the
Monica,
telephone.
thank you very much. All right, so Sharp James had nothing better to say than to attack two of my colleagues and myself yesterday. Well, okay. And I guess he was stuck. Didn't know what to say. When in doubt, just smear some guys on the radio.
That the untold story here is in the paper boxes being passed around by the Fruits of Islam and the security guards of the Nation of Islam. I saw money being tossed into those boxes. I mean, sizable amounts, not just George Washington dollar bills. I mean, Abraham Lincoln's, a few Alexander Hamiltons, Benjamin Franklin's. Wow, the cash that this man is going to be carting away from this crowd that I estimate to be 450 to maybe 500,000 will be sizable indeed, almost a king's ransom.
Yeah, what is he going to do with that money? And I'm sure he'll be declaring it to the IRS.
Oh, no. Well, you know, he has the protection as a so-called religion, as an adherent of the Islam religion. But what he claims he'll be doing is empowering other blacks to get them involved in entrepreneurial pursuits. Probably healthcare products and skincare products, of which there are already plenty in the black community. Now, I have a feeling, Bob, that this money is going to go for the hidden expenses of this Million Man March and to pay the likes of Ben Chavis and Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and all the others who in the last month suddenly hooked on to the sales of Louis Farrakhan and allowed him to become the #1 son of black America. He is the leader, and they were all paying tribute to him. I mean, at one point today, you almost thought that Allah himself was taking second stage to Louis Farrakhan.
Now, Curtis, I don't underestimate Farrakhan, neither do you. He is a real demagogue. He's cunning. He's clever. And I have it on pretty good authority that he did not invoke the usual diatribe, the anti-Semitic stuff, the bloodsuckers, the things like that, that he was very careful to avoid that.
No, in fact, he referred biblically to both the teachings of the Torah, to the teachings of our own Christian doctrines, and did not make fun of them, did not attack them, but sort of used them to justify the reason that he should not be attacked, meaning that there were ancient biblical figures who themselves lived various forms of life, in which in one instance they were doing bad things, in another instance they did good things. They didn't have to publicly atone. But I'll tell you, when all was said and done, he did not atone for any of his past remarks, although he didn't conjure them up and dig them up and revive them. He certainly did nothing to dispel the fact that many people know that Louis Farrakhan is an anti-Semite, a racist, a person who believes that whites are devils, and that Jews are bloodsuckers.
People who had never really been exposed to him before, and we take it for granted that people have, but there's countless millions who haven't. If they see him today, and I'm sure some of them have seen portions of his peroration, they might get a favorable impression of him. What do you think?
Absolutely. Remember, he's a 62-year-old man who looks 42. He's an entertainer. Back in Roxbury, Massachusetts, when he was a Calypso singer, he earned the nickname The Charmer, and he was charming the crowd today. He said, first, as their mentor and spiritual guidance counselor, to sort of like give them a whole viewpoint of the fate of black men and black women in America, both today and in the past, and then he tried to sort of tie it in to what was happening in Washington with Clinton and Newt Gingrich and such. And his basic message, Bob, was, look, we've trusted the white man for 30 years. They claim they'd give us civil rights. They claim they'd give us equality. It's back to the days of slavery for us, so why don't we just go it alone? Why don't we recognize that separatism is the best for both white people and black people? And he was receiving applause, and people were jumping up and praising him as if it was hallelujah, come back. Jesse Jackson, his star has faded. He received light applause from the crowd. Al Sharpton, surprisingly, was not that well received. Farrakhan, above all others, is definitely the king of this affair, and definitely in the eyes of the 400 or 500,000 who gathered here today, the leader of the new black America.
Yeah, I suspect all in one fell swoop, he has emerged as the leader, and he has marginalized Jackson. So, in a way, he's done us a favor.
Keep On Running. At 8 minutes after the hour of 2, and I've tag teamed off with my brother in solidarity, Jay Diamond. And naturally, I brought back my Million Man March t-shirts. Although if you would have been listening to the speakers, Leonard Muhammad and the other cast characters of X fame, Muhammad 1, 2, 3, and 4. Oh, yes, I brought one back, a kosher one. You know, with a little K, so it has the kosher tax on it. Because that's some of the paranoid, schizophrenic kind of talk that I absorbed today while walking around the Million Man March, which turned out to be, as predicted, at least my observation while reporting on the Bob Grant Show, anywhere from 400 to 500,000. Now, I know many will protest and say, are you kidding? It was 1.5 million men. But I happened to have been at the bicentennial a few years ago, in which they had the fireworks display right out there. In fact, right off the steps of the halls of Congress, and it spread back to the Lincoln Memorial, and people were thick like flies back then. The estimated crowd in attendance was 900,000. So all the protests aside, it was about 500,000. That's on the plus side. Now, the positives of the march, because there were some, as there were many negatives. And I hope through our scrambling around here at WABC to be able to bring to you live tape of some of the conversations I had off the grounds area with many of the participants, some of whom were from our greater New York area and were definitely kicking it, as they would say, about Jews and others. And although everyone professed that this is not a rally about Farrakhan off to the sidelines, the speakers not only paid tribute to Farrakhan, acknowledged Farrakhan. It was almost as if Farrakhan was being anointed leader of the black community in 1995, as if there is such a title. But remember, white people need to have that notion, so do black people. We need to know that there is a leader of black people out there. And it was clear that the torch was being passed from Jesse Jackson, who tried the old fire and brimstone routine. I mean, he was at his best. Up with hope, down with dope. Still using the same old lines. And they are starting to wear thin and get a bit corny. But he did it with passion. He did it with vigor. He did it with a lot of emotion. But it was clearly the changing of the guard. One could see that. Out of the many who were there in the audience, most who are not members of the Nation of Islam, who are not Muslims, most who are happy with the faith that they had. But on the positive note, since about 99.9% of the crowd were black males, and boy, this is one day that I was the minority of all minorities. I was like the Polynesian, happens to have shown up at the Morven Tabernacle Choir gathering in Salt Lake City. Like a lone face out there. And although most people respected me, treated me well, there was that fringe element who gave me fire and brimstone, made me feel like a hemorrhoid in a red beret, and in fact were prancing and dancing as I maneuvered in and around the crowd, screaming out, "Sleazebag SLIWA! Sleazebag SLIWA! Sleazebag SLIWA!" Giving me hell, but I'm used to it. But the positive thing of the march, you had upwards of 450,000 black males of all ages, very old, middle-aged, young. And I didn't see any acts of violence. I didn't see any fisticuffs. I didn't see any drinking. I didn't see anybody lighting up any Philly blunts. I heard some curse words from time to time, but not like the typical kind of language I hear on the street corners of inner-city America pouring out of the mouths of black males a mile a minute. They were respectful. They listened. I had to spend a lot of hours there in the mall because there were a lot of speakers, many of whom were stale, old messages, old rhymes, old times. And clearly, on another day, many of the people might have just walked off and engaged themselves in other activities and just timed themselves to come back for 3 o'clock when Farrakhan was scheduled to speak, because that's why most folks were there. They won't tell you that. But they were there to listen to Farrakhan. They were there to hear him speak. They were there to help anoint, quote, the new black leader in America. So on the positive side, it was a peaceful gathering. No violence. Little foul language. No drugs, no booze. Lots of respect. Lots of professions of love and respect towards one another. a certain entrepreneurial spirit on the outside fringes of the park. Tents were set up, tables set up, and entrepreneurs, all black, were plying their trade. Many of them selling T-shirts. And as I said, I brought back 2 mementos requested by the staff of the morning program, so I did my duty because I wasn't going to spend not a nickel, dime, or penny on any of that stuff. And then there was the literature. And I took my time perusing through the books that were on sale. Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a Nation of Islam book, Anti-Semitic as the Day is Long, and the bow-tied, friendly-clad members of the Fruits of Islam, as far as the eye could see. But there was that entrepreneurial spirit, and things were being sold. Commercial enterprise was underway. So that was good. But what was bad? You know, with 450 to 500,000 black males and some of their supporters, I saw all kinds of flags waved high in the sky. Oh, there was the traditional flag of black pride, black, red, and green, all over the place. There were Jamaican flags and Trinidadian flags and flags of different West Indian islands. There were some flags I couldn't even recognize or identify. But I'll be damned if not for the Washington Monument and the standard flags that circle that monument, there would have been no American flags prominently displayed. If you have a gathering of 500,000 Americans, and these were not foreigners, how is it that not 1 minute was devoted to the national anthem, to the Pledge of Allegiance, to recognizing the greatness of America, to recognizing the loss of life on the part of veterans who came in all different colors, black, white, and in between, whose sacrifice provided all of us an opportunity to come forward and voice our diverse opinions and to give even the likes of a fringe player like Farrakhan, noted as a race baiter and an anti-Semite, a forum, an opportunity to speak without being locked up and sent to the gulag. Not a moment was devoted to that, ladies and gentlemen. Instead, there was message after message by speakers that were following up on what was to have been the keynote theme of Louis Farrakhan. White supremacy is to blame for America's woes. Blacks, distrustful of each other, are still under the control of our former slave owners and their children. And there were spin-offs of that theme, but no patriotic pride. And I asked a number of just regular, average, everyday, ordinary black men, some middle class, some poor, some who were with their families, their young sons, why that was. Some didn't necessarily understand it. Others said, well, you know, that's your flag. It's your country. It's not our country. I couldn't quite understand that response. What do you mean it's not your country? Well, what other country do you want to go to? Oh, well, I'll go to Sierra Leone. I'll go to Senegal. Well, hey, pal, I'll pay first-class tickets right now and see if you could hold a rally like this of Farrakhan speaking before the masses in Senegal or Sierra Leone without local leadership there, the local junta fearing that some kind of cabal might be underway, and Farrakhan would either be exiled, sent packing back to the United States, or placed under house arrest. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No. This is your country. You white man. This is your country. Not most, but some. At least those who wanted to answer that question. And I would term the speech given by Louis Farrakhan the Screwy Louis speech. From now on, that will be my nickname for Louis Farrakhan. He is definitely screwy. He starts off doing this numerology chart. I couldn't believe it. Here he has an entire audience in his hands. Everybody is paying attention to Louis Farrakhan for the very first time. People may have never heard of this man before, but now they're following every word that is passing from his lips. And he's talking about the importance of the number 19 and the number 6. And he's using all kinds of Masonic principles to make his points. And then he refers to the dollar bill and the various Latin terminology on the dollar bill. And then he's talking about all kinds of comparisons between Egyptian constructional abilities and the constructional abilities that went into building the Capitol, the architecture. And it was an I and me speech. I mean, he referred I, me more times than I've ever heard from any mail-order minister or any egomaniac here at WABC, yours truly included. I, me was the main course of Louis Farrakhan. And he said God had given him a validation, had validified this march. He made comparisons of himself to Moses and Jesus. He did a bait and switch. I mean, he came about as close to saying he was a prophet as Muhammad himself. He came, I mean, just a hair's close to declaring himself that. And he was the hit of the crowd. There was no question. They waited for Louis Farrakhan. They applauded him. They interrupted him. And they stood there for 3 hours, and this speech went on and on. And let me tell you something. I've heard Screwy Louie before, and he can turn a phrase. He can turn an audience out. He left that audience hanging. Out of the 2.5 to 3 hour speech, I'd say about only a half hour of it was power-packed and dynamic. And only that part dealt with the atonement area of what black men would have to do to make up for their own indiscretions. But the rest of the 2 hour diatribe, 2.5 hour diatribe, was directed at white America, at white America's sins, at white America's trials and tribulations. And the theme was separatism. Separatism was the way that Louis Farrakhan was prescribing that black America go. Not participation, not voter registration, not turning one set of officials out and replacing them with a different set, but rather, I think, by literally going to the grounds of the civil rights speech given by Dr. Martin Luther King that helped trigger much of that legislation in the early 60s. He essentially was saying that it is a changing of the guard. As I saw the torch being passed on from Jesse Jackson, who had faltered and has been faltering, and has sort of lost that pizzazz. As that torch went on to Farrakhan, so too the torch of separatism passed from the hands of the integrationalists, as many of them appeared on that same stage, like Joseph Lowry of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and other noted black Baptist ministers who had been part and parcel of the civil rights movement, but were now paying homage to Louis Farrakhan. Oh, if times have changed. I'd be more than interested in talking to anybody who happened to have been a participant in the 500,000-man march on Washington, D.C. today, although officials there claiming, naturally, of the Nation of Islam, 1.5 million. It was 500,000, possibly a few thousand over. 212-563-WABC. Hopefully later on in the program, after we get a few of these technological glitches together, we'll be able to give you some of the conversations live over the air that I engaged in all afternoon long. And it was rough. At times I felt like I was being put through a meat grinder. I was getting harassed verbally. Nothing I couldn't deal with. One of the brothers decided to spit on me, claiming I had no business being there. I was a white devil, although he was put into deep check by one of his own members of his entourage. But for the most part, treated well. Lots of high fives, shakes of the hand, lots of people wanting to engage me in conversation, whether as leader of the Guardian Angels or a talk show host here at WABC. But I was a lone white face out there. I can assure you, my view of the march could well be different than an black African male who was in attendance, whether from the mother country or from the United States. But still, explain this to me. Why no American flags? Why no national anthem? Why no Pledge of Allegiance? Why no recognition of all those who had died to preserve the freedoms that would allow people to come together in this one place only, to exercise free speech, as screwy as Louis' message may have been at times, and yet not face any penalties for such. 7 minutes after 3, the official theme of the 500,000-man March on Washington. And again, you get a chance to pick or pan it, whether it's Soul Train and Don Cornelius or, obviously, American Bandstand with Dick Clark. Pick or pan this song. I don't think it's going to make top 40, but then again, I've heard worse. But listen a little bit.
We've come together as mass confirmation that regardless of denomination, we hear redemption's call. Oh, and the love of God has provided. The ancestral spirits have guided us from all that has kept us divided into a spiritual bond. Black men are standing tall. Marches on, marches on, marches on.
Got some possibilities at 8 minutes after the hour of 3. We're back on with Kareem, who we asked to hold over through the break. He mentioned how Minister Farrakhan today, in some of his religious analogies about Islam, in referring to Master Farad, may have committed shirk. And as a non-Muslim, my perception, Kareem, of Islam is that it offers salvation to the righteous and God-fearing of all religions. And Muslims believe in the revelations of many prophets. I've heard them refer to Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad. But I don't believe that you have as an image of Allah that he took human form, as I would Jesus Christ. We believe the Son of God took human form. I don't believe that the Muslims do. And obviously the Quran is your guiding light. It's God's word and final revelation to the Prophet Muhammad that I think took place over a period of about 25 years. I mean, that's the basis of what I know about Islam. And Kareem, that's not what I've learned about the Nation of Islam. Other than their references to the Quran from time to time, they seem to have gone in a completely different direction. Would I be correct on that?
Well, Minister Farrakhan is basically standing on the shoulders of Elijah Muhammad, what Elijah Muhammad began teaching, and that's what Farrakhan has taken over. My basic problem with Farrakhan is that he actually knows better. He knows what he is teaching is wrong, and for whatever reason, maybe he's the opportunist of the world, but he knows the difference between right and wrong, and he knows what he's teaching is wrong.
Well, Kareem, he has said publicly, he didn't say it this day, although he alluded to it, that a vision, he was struck by a vision. That's how this whole idea of this Million Man March came about, and that he had actually traveled to a spaceship out there in outer space, met with Elijah Muhammad, and that's where this idea was consummated. And then he knows the audience is looking at him like, here's the Screwy Louie part, and he goes, hey, you may think I'm a nut, but too bad that's the way it happened. Now, I don't think an imam would be normally talking like that.
Hey, I wasn't there, so I don't know what type of vision he had, but that's none of my concern. My concern is that he commits shirk, and he repeatedly does, and he knows.
What is shirk? Explain to our audience what that is.
Okay, the basis of shirk is, as a Muslim bears witness that there's no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his last messenger. And you, as a Muslim, you are not to associate any partners with Allah. He is, and he even in one of the prayers he recited, he even referred to that. But yeah, he still associates partners with Allah, and you're associating Allah with Farad Muhammad and coming in a person of man. You know, he's committing shirk.
All right, now, Kareem, this past week we have seen press conferences galore of either Farrakhan supporters or Farrakhan detractors. We saw Angela Davis, the former communist, who is now once again back in the university system of California as a professor and as a elder there. We have seen a whole host of other black women feminists come out and condemn the march because it excluded women. Now, I would have thought this would have been the perfect opportunity for a world body of Islamic groups with their leaders represented to hold a press conference blaspheming Farrakhan and pointing out to the rest of America that this guy is not teaching basic Islamic text. And yet they didn't do that. Why?
Well, because Muslims are devoted to the worship of Allah. They're not devoted to run around, chase every Tom, Dick, and Harry who wants to get up and let the medium put them in the forefront, portray, hey, this is Islam. So when, when someone thinks of Islam, they think of Farrakhan, and the media has portrayed that, and they have pushed that, and that's what the condition is in America now. And Muslims are not responsible for changing everybody's mind in the world, getting on TV and denouncing Farrakhan.
But Kareem,
Allah will handle Farrakhan.
Yeah, but Kareem,
so that's
you have
not
to
our
understand.
Responsibility.
Again,
that you have to blame the media.
Yeah, but Kareem, you can't blame entirely the media, because if you were to present a argument and give them something visual to film and to put on the 6 o'clock news, they would do it. This problem here, Kareem, is perception. Again, as I mentioned to one of the original callers.
Just like the media goes out and follows Farrakhan around and goes in private rooms and listen to everything he says, they can do that with real Muslims and say, hey, America, this is true Islam. Farrakhan is bull, and they don't want to do that.
Yeah, but you see, Kareem, media loves adversarial situations.
Of course they do.
So if a Muslim...
They can give it.
Okay.
But what my duty is, when I see a person and they think that Islam is Farrakhan, I say, no, he isn't, and I sit them down, and I show them, and I prove and point out to them where Farrakhan is wrong, and let them understand one-on-one that, hey, this guy's not right. He's not teaching Islam. Now, anything else they want to listen to Farrakhan on about economic development and everything, hey, that's all fine.
All right, and they had a chance to do that today, but again, perception is 90% of the battle. If you were to go up to the average American, Carl Cush, today, 1995, and say, what is the face of Islam in America? 9 out of 10 people, if they even knew what the hell I was talking about, would say Louis Farrakhan, the Nation of Islam. To them, that is what Islam is about. Now, those of you out there who are practitioners of the religion of Islam, you better get your rear in gear. Because if you don't want this blasphemer, this misrepresentation of your religion, to signal to Americans what truly Muslim beliefs are, you'd better start putting on a good PR battle out there and confronting him. And don't tell me that that's not the way Muslims handle things, because when I go to the Middle East and I see the reports coming out of the Middle Eastern countries or the Middle Eastern clerics, even Omar Abdel Shikran submitted to interviews, even though he's the blind cleric, right? And naturally, there is always the tried and true, always ready, Dr. Mahdi, spokesperson for the American Arab Muslim Mission. Boy, he's ready at the drop of a dime. And yet, you know, the perception again is that fellow Muslims will not come out publicly and attack Farrakhan, will not have press conferences, will not ask to debate him, will not rent out halls and say, Farrakhan, come with all of your Nation of Islam members, pack the halls to the rafters, come with your fruits of Islam, let us debate the logic of what your Muslim teachings are and the illogic of the way you approach it and you present it, and we will destroy you in front of your own followers, and then you will have Farrakhan on the run. But you're afraid to do that because you're afraid to attack another black man. That's what it gets down to. So Screwy Louie can go on his way and talk about meeting Elijah Muhammad in rocket ships and can carry on the absolute abortion of Muslim teachings that Elijah Muhammad has projected, that it was the ancient scientist Yaqub who, while experimenting with chemicals, saw his experiment go awry. And that's how the white devils, that's right, yours truly and others, were created. And now black people have to pay the price for that. Sort of like what society has been told, pay the price for Adam eating the apple as Eve tempted him. I mean, that's a story. But an ancient, crazed scientist, Yaqub, with a science invention that went awry, that's what created white devils? Please, give me a break. At 3:17 of the Curtis SLIWA Show. Hey, Muslims out there, what are you going to do to clean all of this up? How come you're not having any press conferences? How come you're not relying on Dr. Mahdi, who knows how to manipulate and operate within the media stratosphere here in America? You could have done it this past week. The whole world would have been watching you. You could have had a demonstration outside of the gathering today, and people would have clearly paid a lot of attention. But you're not. Why is that? If this man has so convoluted what Islam is, if he has so twisted and turned it and has become the symbol of Islam, he literally has become the Antichrist, what we would refer to as the Antichrist, right? What are you going to do about it?
First thing is the Egyptians, as Farrakhan said today, were not black, they were white men. And no black nation ever built. Second...
All right, now hold off on that point. I was listening, and obviously I heard the analogies he was making between the Egyptian architecture and the architecture of our nation's capital. He spoke a lot about Pharaoh, but I didn't get from his conversation that he was calling Egyptians white.
No. He was calling them black.
Right, Nubian
people. That's a
people.
common misconception among blacks. And they could criticize us for appropriating or wiping out their history when they're appropriating ours. The Egyptians were white.
All right, now, I want to let everybody know, Deke, that I am going to actually devote in the future an entire program to that very subject, because when it comes to mentioning that, I have had more diverse opinions as to what Egyptians actually were originally than almost any other subject that I've ever dared to engage in.
Maybe I can help out, because I've written a paper on that.
Yes.
And I could send it to you.
Absolutely, if you could. And if you can, just before you get off, I know you have other points to make. Chris Brandemarty, if you would get Deke's number, because we'll certainly want to call him up when we engage in that debate. What are your other 2 points, Deke?
The second point is I feel that Farrakhan is vain and he's a phony. And it'll probably be his movement's downfall because of his vanity. Now, the third point I'm making is...
All right, now let's deal with that point. First of all, he's 62 years old. He is... in perfect shape. I mean, he looks like he's 42. The man is like a Duracell battery. He's nonstop. He spoke today for close to 3 hours. And, he didn't even lose his train of thought. He was just moving and grooving. And, yes, he is very vain. He is what we used to call in the neighborhood a pretty boy.
I think so, Curtis. I think he's so taken with himself that in times of real crisis, his judgment will be skewed by his vanity and his self-centeredness. And that is going to cause a lot of black people to be misled seriously.
I don't have to take an exemption from that, because all of us here at WABC probably suffer from the same type of vanity problems.
You're not assuming responsibility for millions of black folk.
No, understood, but it is a trait that many of us share.
That's fine. We can do that if we're private, you know?
Understood.
That's fine for a talk show host that makes them colorful.
I've never heard Farrakhan, though, say that he had half his brain tied behind his back, and that he is a messenger. Although he has said he is a messenger of Elijah Muhammad. But go ahead.
All right. The third point is, and this may sound funny, but I'm for what he's doing, Curtis. You see, I'm a white nationalist, and I seek separation of the races. Now, this is Farrakhan's one great truth, that we cannot live together because nature prohibits it.
Now, what do you mean? Wait, what do you mean nature prohibits it? I've lived amongst blacks for half of my life. Nothing naturally created by anything ever prevented me from living amongst blacks and sharing with them equally in life's sufferings and in life's benefits.
Well, you know, Curtis, I was a pretty good ball player. I played all the way through college, and I had the similar experience that you had. I got along exquisitely well with blacks. However, that's the micro. In the macro, and as we're beginning to see over and over again in contemporary times, and this is steamrolling, it's snowballing now, we're beginning to see that in the large, not in the small, but in the large, we are less and less reconcilable. And these things are boiling down to such a fundamental note that I believe that nature is really exerting herself here. We are not going to be able to get along because our desires that are imbued by nature within us are so different.
How are they different? I've not experienced that at all.
Well,
the same goals, same aspirations.
All you have to really do is just examine people's tastes, what they prefer. You could look at culture, music, behavior.
Well, a lot of white folks are certainly doing the black thing lately.
Well, I think that's a sad result of, music companies pushing that music. And I think that anybody can acquire a taste for anything. I mean, men acquire a taste for pornography.
Hold on a second.
That doesn't mean it's good for them,
Hold on a second, Deke.
Yeah, go ahead.
The original American music form, culturally, is jazz. Blacks don't really go and listen to jazz. It's white folks who do. Whites can't get enough of it. Japanese, Asians can't get enough of jazz. And yet, let's face it, it is part of that black creative energy. There are whites who have contributed to it, but it's a black thing, almost to speak.
Yeah, but I don't think that dispels my point, because when you look at the rest of the range of black music, you see that the whites are following that, especially white youth. That slamming rap kind of stuff, that's it can be very infectious, and even though it's rhythmic, I think it's seductive to our people, and I think it's leading them into a direction that they probably ought not go. And I think Farrakhan would recommend his own people not to go down that road.
Well, wouldn't you make the same suggestion about heavy metal, white-oriented rock and roll?
Well, that's true, Curtis, but
and that didn't come from black folks.
All we're doing is pointing out the differences again, as you see.
Yeah, but you see, I think what you're doing is you're putting one particular racial group under an electron microscope, and you're looking for the negative aspects that you attribute to what they are doing and what they are creating.
I don't think I'm being particularly negative, Curtis. I think if I have been, I want to correct that by saying that I would prefer not to be among them in the large.
But
I think
that is your choice.
Would do much better if we were by ourselves as whites in a white nation, and the blacks, as the Muslims want, as Malcolm X wanted, would do much better in a nation of their own making.
Now let me get
a little steam rolling here, Curtis.
All right, but let me make a point though that you are not alone in this. Louis Farrakhan at many of his rallies has invited white separatists, has rolled out the red carpet. I remember at the Inglewood Coliseum where the L.A. Lakers play, seeing then Mayor Tom Bradley, who was running for governor, do exactly what David Dinkins had done in New York, speak out against Farrakhan's appearance there. And as part of the promotional activities, I saw, of all people, Reverend Buzzard Butler from Hayden Lake, Idaho, who was the spiritual guiding counselor for the order. I saw Matthews, who ultimately ended up dying in gunfire as the FBI shot him up in Puget Sound after he had declared war against America. And they were all there at the invitation of Farrakhan.
Fine, because white separatists and black separatists have a similar message. We may never actually aid each other directly. However, we support the message because we believe that we can really stop the hate by separating.
All right, so how do we balkanize our country to successfully do that?
Well, I don't know if a balkanization will be the ultimate answer. However, it would be a hell of a lot better than what we have now.
But it defeats the whole purpose, the whole reality of what America has become. The only place in the world where people so divergent in backgrounds can actually come together and be treated equally.
Well, Curtis, you know something? I think that the survival of one's race needs to take a precedent over the maintenance of even the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah, but when you
the
say...
white man and the black man can make new nations.
Yeah, but when you
they
say...
can't make new nations if they're dead.
When you say the survival of a race...
Yes.
If all of us, if we are to believe that we are all descendants of Adam and Eve, at least if those who practice Christianity follow on that line, then clearly blacks and whites emerged from an original man or woman of some type.
I certainly hope that when you invite me on your program to talk about the Egyptians, we can briefly segue into this notion of having common ancestors. It's also part of my paper.
All right, so hold on the line, Deke. Hold on the line. Chris Brandemarty, if you can get Deke's telephone number, that's going to be a 4-hour extravaganza. We're Egyptians, white or black. I've already solicited a whole host of opinions on that subject from noted Americans, and you can't believe that the diverse opinions, how extraordinary they are. But the purity of one's race, who cares? The purity. If I go into my background, when I look at my grandfather, Anton SLIWA, who's Polish, came from a little village, Nova Lima, right near the southern border of Czechoslovakia. I see a man with Turkish features, auburn hair. That's the kind of a person you'd probably see walking in the streets of Constantinople. Oh, I don't want to upset people there. Not quite kinky, but auburn hair. You don't see that amongst Poles generally. That's because, who knows, whether it was Genghis Khan or whether it was the Turkish horde of Suleiman's day, the Ottoman Empire sweeping through Europe, the mixing that took place. And anybody who is of Italian background cannot ignore the fact that with all the excursions of Italians into Somalia, into Libya, into North Africa, and then naturally Hannibal storming through Italy itself, the mixing and matching, what nonsense to think that anyone out there other than Bruce Anderson is of pure race. We know he is, because he's the mighty Swede. And let's face it, the brothers never made it that far north because, hell, it was too cold, and according to Leonard Jeffries, we were still living in the caves. Because we were the ice people, and the brothers were the sun people. At 346 of the Curtis SLIWA Show.
Good morning, Curtis.
Yes, sir?
Can you hear me all right?
I hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I don't want to deal with that white racist any more than I want to deal with a black separatist. I'm sorry I said racist separatist. Because let me tell you something. How is he going to find out who is black and who is white? Give an example of what I'm talking about.
Yes.
My wife's father looks like Bob Grant.
Yes.
See what I'm talking about?
No, wait a second. Say that again, Henry.
My wife's father looks like Bob Grant.
Holy mackerel, boy, he must really catch some grief from time to time, or a lot of handshakes.
Oh, no. Now, what I really want to talk about, you mentioned black businesses. As long as blacks think about going into a black business, they more than likely won't make it for 7 years. They'll fail. You have to go in business, period.
Yes.
Okay? Forget about the race, because I work with all of those people that somebody's been talking about, like Koreans, Egyptians, all of those people I work with. We run a business, and we get along just fine.
Yes.
We don't have any problem, but the main thing is we're in business. We're not in the black business. Maybe that's what some of the people think. 35 to 40% of our customers are white.
I see.
And then it's broken down between all the races. We don't operate a black business. As a matter of fact, we've been in one type of business for ever since 1963. It was not black. We didn't cater to black. We didn't cater to whites. I could tell when I would get orders from blacks because where, say, they lived in Harlem, someplace like that.
Right.
Then I'd get orders from, say, Mississippi. And these people from Mississippi was telling me they're nice white.
I see.
I had a customer over in Harlem called me and told me they were going to send some black people over here to beat me up.
Why?
Well, because I didn't ship the order when they didn't get the order when they expected. Maybe it was 3 weeks before they got it. So I said, come on, I'm black just like you are.
I see.
I heard nothing else from the people.
Now, question here is you made a very strong comment that you have to have patience for 7 years, that it's not an overnight success. You're not going to just invest in a business and bingo, it's like playing the lottery or playing the numbers.
You better bet your bottom dollar on it. You have to learn. Now, reason a lot of black people are not in business today, we came into this part of the country to show the blacks how to operate a business.
I see.
We got here, we found 3 black businesses in the city of Newark. And they knew what they would do. If a person's been in business for 10 years, you can't tell them anything anyway.
Yes.
But you can't take a mechanic and start him operating a furniture store.
Yes.
You got to have some training. Now, if you go back to the turn of the century, black business was thriving just like any other business.
Sure.
They went into real estate business, they went into banking, hotels, and everything.
Yes.
But there came along a depression, and that put black people out of business a little bit quicker than they did some of the whites.
Right.
So what happened was these people said, I will never invest with a black man again.
I see.
That's part of the old slave psychology.
I see. Now, that's an excellent point. But today, when I was at the 500,000-man rally in Washington, I saw blacks spending a lot of money. First off, there was a call from Leonard Muhammad, spokesperson for Louis Farrakhan, to contribute money, to raise dollars in the air and to put them in boxes. And they did, and they filled those boxes up. I mean, definitely the Nation of Islam racked up today, and I have no problem with that because there are churches and other groups who rack up whenever they have gatherings. And then there were the entrepreneurs who were selling products, and blacks were spending an incredible amount of money buying these products. And I'm saying to myself, no, wait a second. Here's all this money being spent on products, and if I was to go up to many of these same average black men and black women and say, trust in investing your money in a black business pursuit, some of them would look at me with cross eyes, like, you got to be out of your mind. And yet there they were there in a day of solidarity and let's work together and network. Why is it that they refuse to take those risks that so many other immigrants and Americans will take, knowing that most times they're going to lose their shirt?
Well, let me ask you something. Who is selling these products?
Blacks today.
Okay. But let me tell you something else. Do you realize that it probably costs more than $2 million to put that fair on down in Washington?
Oh, yeah, it's expensive.
All right. Where is the money coming from? Somebody may wind up short. See, a lot of people think some black churches are doing quite well, but I'm sitting on the board of several black churches, and I can tell you, with the exception of the extremely large ones, most of them are from hand to mouth.
Oh, that is true. It's
but they take in plenty of money.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And people seem to think that some of the churches are wealthy. When some of us, even including some of the people who call you tonight, I think I recognize one or two voices, they know that most of the black churches are not wealthy.
Yes.
And somebody's probably going to get stuck with that deal down in Washington.
All right, well, good point, Henry, and do appreciate the advice that you've given as a black entrepreneur who's known the best of times and the hardest of times. You seem to have answered a lot of the questions that I was throwing out there to the audience, but maybe some of you can sort of connect some of those other dots right here on the Curtis Sliwa Show.
Hey, Curtis. How you doing?
I'm doing quite well.
Good. Well, I'm in a relatively calm, tranquil mood tonight, so I won't be vituperative. But I'll try to make a couple of points. No, I wasn't there. It was an impossibility because of personal considerations. But I want to say this to you, Curtis.
Yes.
A Jew would look at a Catholic with the Immaculate Conception and laugh to himself because he has a completely different concept. Now, when this guy was talking about Muslims, there are differences in all religions. He was a Sunni. There's Hanafi and there's Nation of Islam. Now, when Malcolm X was alive and a member of the Nation of Islam, he went to Mecca as a Muslim and was accepted. And you cannot go to Mecca, which is the Holy Land, and be accepted. You can't go there if you're not a Muslim. Okay, so they are accepted. And I want to warn you of this. If you talk to a Christian Scientist or a Jehovah's Witness and you're a Catholic, they would laugh at you because they have differences. So, and remember, Farrakhan is not nearly as bombastic and outspoken and argumentative as Malcolm was. Okay, everybody seems to forget that Malcolm used to get on the television and talk about Jews. There wasn't all this hell raised. And this business about Jacob and all that, that's ancient. There's nothing new about that. Everybody's talking about this guy invented that. He didn't invent that.
All right, but now let's look at the most recent revelation that came from Farrakhan himself when he was promoting this million-man march around the country, claiming that he received this as a vision as he had actually entered a spaceship and spoke with Elijah Muhammad himself. And he himself has said to the crowds when they've heard this, you probably think I'm crazy, I'm nuts, but I'm not.
Listen, Curtis.
I mean, why would a learned, scholarly man, as he claims to be, say such an outrageous thing?
It may not be as outrageous as you think.
Do you really believe? Come on, Hilly. Do you really believe he boarded a...
Let me answer you.
We need to go back to Long John Neville and Candy Jones for this one.
Let me answer that for you, because I didn't hear that particular statement. He may have actually believed that. It may have come to him in a dream. It may have been self-hypnosis. I don't know.